The old millionaire let a homeless woman and her daughter live in his garage. The sun was setting on the horizon, casting long shadows over the well-manicured gardens of the Mendez mansion. Gabriel watched the landscape from his second-floor balcony, a glass of red wine in his wrinkled hand. At 75, he had achieved everything a man could desire materially, but his heart remained empty. The mansion, with its 20 bedrooms, sumptuous halls, and rare works of art, was a silent testament to his success. However, that night, like so many others, the silence was deafening. Gabriel sighed, feeling the weight of loneliness on his tired shoulders. He decided to take a walk through the gardens, something he did frequently to escape the emptiness that filled the marble corridors of his residence. The cool night air invigorated him a little as he walked along the well-lit paths. That's when he saw her. A hunched figure near the property gates caught his attention. Approaching cautiously, Gabriel realized it was a woman, apparently asleep on a stone bench. Her clothes were worn and dirty, and a small backpack lay at her feet. "Ma'am," Gabriel called softly, not wanting to startle her. The woman stirred, slowly opening her eyes. For a moment she seemed disoriented, but then she sat up abruptly, grabbing her backpack. "Sorry, I didn't mean to bother you," she said hurriedly, standing up. "I was just leaving." "Wait," Gabriel asked, raising his hand. "It's okay. You look like you need help." The woman hesitated, her brown eyes studying Gabriel's face with a mixture of fear and hope. She appeared to be about 40 years old, but exhaustion and worry had left marks on her face. "My name is Gabriel Mendez," he introduced himself with a gentle smile. "This is my property. Why don't you come in for a hot cup of tea and rest a bit?" The woman bit her lip, clearly conflicted. I don't want to cause any trouble," she murmured. "It's no trouble at all," Gabriel assured. "In fact, I would appreciate the company." After a moment of hesitation, the woman nodded. "Thank you," she said softly. "My name is Francesca." Gabriel led Francesca to the house, watching as she marveled at the mansion. Inside, he took her to the kitchen, where his housekeeper, Mrs. Maya, was finishing cleaning. "Mrs. Maya, could you prepare some tea and maybe a few sandwiches for our guest?" Gabriel asked. The housekeeper looked curiously at Francesca but nodded without asking questions. "Of course, Mr. Mendez. I'll take care of it right away." While they waited, Gabriel invited Francesca to sit at the kitchen table. Under the bright light, he could better see the state she was in. Her brown hair was disheveled, and there were deep shadows under her eyes. But beyond the tired appearance, Gabriel noticed a spark of intelligence and strength in her gaze. "How long have you been without a place to stay?" Gabriel asked delicately. Francesca lowered her eyes. "A few weeks," she admitted. "And I had to leave where I was living suddenly. I had nowhere to go." Gabriel nodded understandingly. "Well, you can stay here tonight," he offered. "I have several guest rooms. Tomorrow we can talk about how I can help you get back on your feet." Francesca's eyes filled with tears. "Why are you doing this for me? You don't even know me." Gabriel smiled sadly. "Let's just say I've been blessed with more than I need in this life. It's the least I can do to help someone in need." At that moment, Mrs. Maya returned with a tray containing steaming tea and a stack of sandwiches. Francesca ate gratefully while Gabriel watched her in silence, wondering what circumstances would have led that woman to such a situation. After Francesca finished eating, Gabriel led her to one of the guest rooms upstairs. It was a spacious room, elegantly decorated in shades of blue and cream. "I hope you'll be comfortable here," Gabriel said. "There's an attached bathroom with everything you might need. Feel free to use anything." Francesca looked around, seeming a little dazed. "This is very generous," she said softly. "I don't know how to thank you." Gabriel smiled. "No need to thank me. Rest well, Francesca. We can talk more in the morning." When Gabriel closed the door behind him, he felt a strange mixture of emotions. Concern for Francesca, certainly, but also a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in a long time. Maybe helping this woman could fill some of the emptiness in his life. The next morning, Gabriel found Francesca in the kitchen, chatting shyly with Mrs. Maya over a cup of coffee. She looked more rested, having taken a shower and dressed in some clean clothes Mrs. Maya had provided. "Good morning," Gabriel greeted, sitting at the table. "I hope you slept well." Francesca nodded. "Better than I've slept in years," she admitted. "Mr. Mendez, I really appreciate your kindness, but I can't stay here. I've already overstayed my welcome." Gabriel tilted his head, studying her. "And where would you go, Francesca?" She looked away, clearly without an answer. "Look," Gabriel continued gently, "I have a proposition for you. I have a guest house in the back of the property that hasn't been used in years. Why don't you stay there for a while until you get back on your feet? In return, maybe you could help me out with a few tasks around here." Francesca's eyes widened. I don't know what to say," she stammered. "Say yes," Gabriel smiled. "I must confess I have selfish reasons too. This house is too big for a lonely old man like me. It would be nice to have someone around." After a moment of hesitation, Francesca slowly nodded. "Okay," she said, a small smile forming on her lips. "Thank you, Mr. Mendez. I promise you won't regret it." In the weeks that followed, Francesca settled into the guest house. It was a charming building, with 2 bedrooms, a spacious living room, and a small kitchen. Gabriel insisted that she decorate it as she pleased, and gradually, the place began to take on Francesca's personality. Gabriel found Francesca to be pleasant company. She was intelligent and good-humored, always ready for a stimulating conversation during the meals they now shared regularly. However, he noticed that she rarely talked about her past, skillfully deflecting very personal questions. One day, about a month after Francesca's arrival, Gabriel found her in the garden, staring at a flower bed with a distant expression. "A penny for your thoughts," he said softly, approaching. Francesca startled slightly but then smiled. "Sorry, I was just remembering." "Remembering what?" Gabriel asked gently. Francesca hesitated for a moment before answering. "Painting," she said finally. "I used to be a painter, you know. It's been so long." Gabriel's eyes lit up with interest. "Really? What kind of painting did you do?" "A little bit of everything," Francesca replied, a touch of nostalgia in her voice. "But I loved painting portraits and landscapes. There was something magical about capturing the essence of a person or the beauty of a place on canvas." "Why did you stop?" Gabriel asked softly. Francesca's expression darkened. "It's complicated," she murmured. "Let's just say circumstances forced me to abandon that part of my life." Gabriel nodded, respecting her reluctance to elaborate, but an idea began to form in his mind. The next day, Gabriel led Francesca to a room on the 3rd floor of the mansion that she hadn't yet seen. It was a spacious room, with large windows letting in plenty of natural light. "What is this place?" Francesca asked, looking around curiously. Gabriel smiled. "It used to be my late wife Eleanor's painting studio. She was an artist too." Francesca's eyes widened at the sight of the easels, paints, and brushes, neatly organized on shelves. "Mr. Mendez, this is—" she began. But Gabriel gently interrupted her. "Please call me Gabriel," he said. "And yes, this studio is yours now if you want it." Francesca gaped. I can't accept this," she stammered. "You can," Gabriel insisted. "This place has been empty for too long. It would be an honor to see it used again, especially by someone as talented as you." Tears began to form in Francesca's eyes. "You haven't even seen my work," she weakly protested. Gabriel smiled. "I don't need to see it to know. The passion in your eyes when you talk about painting tells me everything I need to know." Slowly, as if fearing it would all disappear, Francesca walked to one of the easels. She touched the paints with reverence, picking up a brush and twirling it between her fingers. "I don't even know if I remember how to paint anymore," she murmured. "There's only one way to find out," Gabriel replied gently. That night, Francesca didn't come down for dinner. Concerned, Gabriel went up to the studio, only to find her completely absorbed in a canvas, paintbrush in hand, and smudges of paint on her face and clothes. He stood at the door for a moment, watching her work. There was an intensity in her expression, a piece he had never seen before. Quietly, he withdrew, not wanting to interrupt the moment. In the weeks that followed, Francesca spent more and more time in the studio. Gabriel rarely bothered her there, respecting her creative space. But he noticed a change in her. There was a new light in her eyes, a renewed energy in her step. One day, about 2 months after giving Francesca the studio, Gabriel was surprised by a knock on his office door. "Come in," he called, looking up from his papers. Francesca entered, looking nervous but determined. "Gabriel," she began, I'd like to show you something if you have a moment." Intrigued, Gabriel followed her to the studio. There, she led him to an easel covered by a cloth. "This is the first portrait I've painted in years," she said softly, removing the cloth. Gabriel was speechless. It was a portrait of him, sitting in his favorite armchair in the library. But it wasn't just an accurate physical representation. Somehow, Francesca had captured something deeper, the loneliness in his eyes, but also the kindness and strength he carried. "Francesca," he finally managed to say, "this is extraordinary." She blushed slightly. "You really like it?" "Like it is an understatement," Gabriel replied, still marveling at the painting. "This is true talent, Francesca. You shouldn't hide it from the world." Francesca lowered her eyes. I don't know if I'm ready to show my work to other people." Gabriel turned to her, placing his hands gently on her shoulders. "You're more than ready," he said firmly. "In fact, I have an idea." In the months that followed, Gabriel worked tirelessly behind the scenes, making phone calls and using his connections in the art world. Francesca continued to paint, producing a series of stunning portraits and landscapes. Finally, one Friday evening, Gabriel invited Francesca to dinner on the veranda. "I have a surprise for you," he announced as they were served dessert. Francesca raised an eyebrow, curious. "What is it?" Gabriel smiled, handing her an envelope. "Open it." With trembling hands, Francesca opened the envelope and read the contents. Her eyes widened in shock. This is an invitation to an exhibition," she stammered. "An exhibition of my work?" Gabriel nodded, grinning widely. "At the most prestigious gallery in the city, no less. They were impressed with the photos of your work I sent them." Francesca seemed to be in shock. "But how? When?" "In a month's time," Gabriel replied. "Enough time for us to get everything ready." Francesca was silent for a long moment, her eyes flitting from the invitation to Gabriel and back. Finally, she spoke, her voice trembling with emotion. "Gabriel, I don't know what to say. This is more than I ever dreamed of." Gabriel smiled gently. "You deserve this, Francesca. Your talent deserves to be seen and appreciated." Tears began to stream down Francesca's face. "You don't understand," she whispered. "I gave up on this so long ago. I never thought I would paint again, let alone have an exhibition." Gabriel leaned forward, taking her hand in his. "Sometimes life gives us second chances, Francesca. All we need is the courage to grab them." Francesca nodded slowly, wiping her tears. "You're right," she said, a smile beginning to form on her lips. "I'm going to do this. I'm going to embrace this opportunity with everything I have." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Francesca spent endless hours in the studio, finalizing paintings and creating new works for the exhibition. Gabriel helped with the practical aspects, dealing with the gallery and taking care of the logistics. As the day of the exhibition approached, Gabriel noticed a change in Francesca. She seemed more confident, more alive. It was as if each brushstroke was bringing her back to life, restoring a part of her that had long been dormant. On the night of the exhibition, the gallery was packed. Art critics, collectors, and enthusiasts crowded around Francesca's paintings, murmuring in appreciation. Francesca was stunning in a navy blue dress, her eyes shining with emotion as she circulated through the gallery, chatting with guests. Gabriel watched her with pride, marveling at her transformation. That's when he noticed a man watching Francesca intently. The man appeared to be about 50 years old, with graying hair and a face weathered by time. There was something in his eyes, a mix of surprise and recognition, that caught Gabriel's attention. He saw the exact moment Francesca noticed the man. She froze mid-sentence, her eyes widening in shock. "Anthony," she whispered, almost inaudibly. The man approached slowly, a hesitant smile on his face. "Francesca," he said softly. "It's been a long time." Gabriel watched the scene with curiosity, feeling like he was witnessing something significant. He approached discreetly, wanting to offer support if Francesca needed it. I can't believe you're here," Francesca said, her voice trembling. Anthony looked around the gallery, admiring the paintings. "When I saw the ad for the exhibition, I could hardly believe it. After all this time, you still paint beautifully, Francesca." Gabriel noticed a shadow pass over Francesca's face. There was history there, he realized, a story she hadn't yet shared. "Thank you, Anthony," Francesca replied softly. I stopped painting for a long time. I only recently started again." Anthony nodded, understanding. "I figured. After you disappeared," he trailed off, noticing Francesca's tense expression. "I'm sorry. I don't want to bring up painful memories. I'm just glad to see you're okay and painting again." At this point, Gabriel decided to intervene. "Excuse me," he said, approaching. "I couldn't help but notice that you two know each other. I'm Gabriel Mendez, Francesca's friend." Anthony shook Gabriel's hand. "Anthony Suarez. Francesca and I studied together at art school many years ago." Gabriel noticed the grateful look Francesca shot him for the interruption. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Suarez," he said cordially. "Perhaps we could all have coffee sometime. I'm sure Francesca would love to catch up." Francesca seemed to hesitate for a moment, but then nodded. "Yes, that would be nice," she said, forcing a smile. Anthony agreed enthusiastically, exchanging contact information with Gabriel before moving away to admire more works. As soon as he was out of earshot, Francesca turned to Gabriel, her eyes filled with contained emotion. "Thank you," she whispered. Gabriel placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "It's okay," he assured. "You don't need to explain anything now. This is your night, Francesca. Enjoy it." Francesca took a deep breath, nodding. She then lifted her head, straightened her shoulders, and went back to circulating the gallery, greeting guests with a renewed smile. The exhibition was a resounding success. Several paintings were sold that night, and critics were effusive in their praise of Francesca's work. When the last guest departed, Francesca collapsed into a chair, exhausted but radiant. "We did it," she said, looking at Gabriel with shining eyes. Gabriel smiled, sitting down beside her. "Francesca, you did it. This was all you." Francesca shook her head. "It wouldn't have been possible without you, Gabriel. You gave me a second chance when I needed it most. If you watched this far, please consider subscribing to the channel and comment where you live." Returning to the story, Gabriel took Francesca's hand, squeezing it gently. "You deserve all the second chances in the world, my dear. And I have a feeling this is just the beginning." In the days following the exhibition, Francesca seemed to float on a cloud of happiness. The positive reviews kept coming in, and several galleries had reached out expressing interest in her work. However, Gabriel noticed there were moments when she seemed distant, lost in thought. He suspected Anthony's reappearance had brought up memories she'd rather keep buried. A week after the exhibition, Gabriel found Francesca sitting in the garden, staring at a distant point. He approached quietly, sitting next to her on the bench. "A penny for your thoughts?" he asked softly. Francesca startled slightly, but then smiled. "Sorry, I was just remembering." Gabriel nodded understandingly. "About Anthony," Francesca sighed, running a hand through her hair. "Not just about him, about everything." Gabriel remained silent, giving her space to continue if she wanted. After a long moment, Francesca spoke again, her voice low and hesitant. "I think I owe you some explanations, Gabriel, about my past, about why I was in that situation when you found me." Gabriel placed a gentle hand over hers. "You don't owe me anything, Francesca, but if you want to share, I'm here to listen." Francesca took a deep breath as if gathering courage. Then, slowly, she began to tell her story. I met Anthony at art school. We were young, passionate about art and life. He was my best friend, my confidant. For a time I thought it could be something more, but, well, life had other plans. She paused, her eyes drifting into the distance again. That's when I met Robert. He was a few years older, a charismatic and successful art collector. I was dazzled. He seemed to appreciate my work in a way no one else had before. Gabriel listened attentively, noting the change in Francesca's voice when she mentioned Robert. At first, it was like a fairy tale. Robert introduced me to influential people in the art world and promoted my work. We got married after a whirlwind romance. I was so in love, so blind. Francesca paused again, taking a deep breath. But then, things started to change. Robert became controlling, possessive. He started criticizing my work, saying I was only successful because of him. Gradually, I isolated myself from all my friends, including Anthony. Gabriel felt a wave of anger at the thought of someone treating Francesca this way, but he remained calm, allowing her to continue. One day, I discovered Robert was involved in illegal business, art forgery, and money laundering. When I confronted him, he beat me brutally. Tears started flowing down Francesca's face. Gabriel squeezed her hand gently, offering silent support. I ran away that night, taking only what I could carry. I left behind my art, my career, everything. I was afraid Robert would find me if I reached out to friends or family. So, I just disappeared. Francesca wiped her tears, her voice gaining strength as she continued. I spent years living in the shadows, moving from city to city, doing odd jobs to survive. I didn't paint once during all that time. It was like that part of me had died. She turned to Gabriel, her eyes filled with emotion. And then you found me. You offered me not just a roof over my head, but a chance to rediscover who I was, to paint again. Gabriel felt his own eyes fill with tears. "Oh, Francesca," he said softly, "I'm so sorry you went through all that. You're incredibly strong and brave." Francesca smiled sadly. "I don't feel strong. I'm still afraid, Gabriel. Afraid that Robert will find me. Afraid that all this will be taken away from me again." Gabriel held her hands firmly. "Listen to me, Francesca. You're not alone anymore. I'm here, and I'll do everything in my power to ensure you're safe. I won't let anyone hurt you again." Francesca looked at him with gratitude, but there was still a shadow of worry in her eyes. What if Robert finds out about the exhibition? What if he comes after me? Gabriel thought for a moment. "Maybe," he said slowly. "It's time to face that fear head on. You can't live in hiding forever, Francesca. You have too much talent, too much to offer the world." Francesca seemed to hesitate. "I don't know if I have the courage for that, Gabriel." "You have more courage than you realize," Gabriel replied firmly. "And you won't be alone. I'll be by your side every step of the way." At that moment, something shifted in Francesca's gaze. A determination Gabriel hadn't seen before shone in her eyes. "You're right," she said, straightening her shoulders. "I can't let fear control me forever. It's time to reclaim my life." Gabriel smiled, proud of the strength he saw in Francesca. "That's the spirit. And the first step could be reconnecting with old friends. How about we set up that coffee with Anthony?" Francesca nodded slowly. "Yes, I think I'd like that." In the days that followed, Gabriel watched Francesca with a mix of admiration and concern. She seemed determined to confront her past, but he could see the emotional toll it was taking. The meeting with Anthony was scheduled for a sunny afternoon at a quiet cafe in the city center. Gabriel insisted on accompanying Francesca, wanting to offer moral support. When they arrived at the cafe, Anthony was already there, seated at an outdoor table. His eyes lit up when he saw Francesca, but Gabriel noticed a mix of emotions on his face: joy, concern, and perhaps a touch of guilt. "Francesca," Anthony said, standing up to greet her. "It's so good to see you again." Francesca smiled nervously. "Hello, Anthony. This is Gabriel, my friend." Gabriel shook Anthony's hand, noting the curious look the man gave between him and Francesca. They sat down, and for a moment, an uncomfortable silence hung over the table. It was Anthony who finally broke it. "Francesca," he began hesitantly. I'm sorry for everything. For not realizing what was going on. For not doing more to help." Francesca raised a hand, cutting him off. "No, Anthony, it wasn't your fault. I pulled away from everyone, including you. There's no way you could have known." Anthony shook his head sadly. "I should have insisted more. When you disappeared, I was devastated. I tried to find you for months." Gabriel watched the interaction in silence, feeling the weight of the shared history between the two. "What happened after I left?" Francesca asked softly, her eyes fixed on Anthony. Anthony sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "It was a difficult time. Everyone was worried about you. I even hired a private detective to try to find you." Francesca's eyes widened in surprise. "You did that?" Anthony nodded. "Yes, but he couldn't find any leads. It was like you had vanished into thin air." He paused, his eyes filling with emotion. "Francesca, what really happened? Why did you run away like that?" Francesca shot a nervous glance at Gabriel, who nodded encouragingly. Taking a deep breath, she began to tell her story to Anthony, her voice shaking slightly, as she described Robert's abuse and her desperate escape. Anthony listened in silence, his face a mask of horror and anger. When Francesca finished, he reached across the table, holding her hand firmly. "Oh, Francesca," he said, his voice hoarse with emotion. "I'm so sorry. If I had known, I would have done anything to help you." Francesca smiled sadly. "I know, Anthony, but at the time, I couldn't trust anyone. I was so scared." Gabriel, who had remained silent during the conversation, finally spoke. "Anthony," he said calmly, "do you have any idea where Robert might be now?" Anthony frowned, thoughtful. "The last I heard of him was about a year ago. He's still in the art world. But there have been rumors about shady business, fraud." Francesca visibly paled. "So he's still out there," she whispered. Gabriel placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Don't worry, Francesca. We won't let him hurt you again." Anthony nodded vigorously. "Gabriel is right. You're not alone in this anymore, Francesca. We're here for you." Francesca looked at the two men, tears shining in her eyes. "Thank you," she said softly. "I don't know what I'd do without you." The rest of the afternoon passed in a mix of nostalgic conversation and cautious planning for the future. Anthony shared stories from the old days at art school, making Francesca laugh with memories of disastrous projects and eccentric professors. Gabriel watched, fascinated, seeing a side of Francesca he hadn't yet known, lighter, more carefree. When they finally said their goodbyes, Anthony hugged Francesca tight. "Please don't disappear again," he murmured. "Promise we'll keep in touch." Francesca nodded, smiling through her tears. "I promise," she said. On the way back home, Francesca was quiet, lost in thought. Gabriel respected her silence, understanding that she needed time to process everything that had happened. It was only when they reached the mansion that Francesca finally spoke. "Gabriel," she said softly, "there's something else I need to tell you. Something I didn't mention before because I was afraid of how you would react." Gabriel felt a pang of concern but kept his expression neutral. "What is it, Francesca?" She took a deep breath, as if gathering courage. "I have a daughter, Gabriel, a 15-year-old girl named Sophia." Gabriel blinked, surprised. "A daughter?" he repeated. Francesca nodded, tears starting to form in her eyes. "When I ran from Robert, she was only 3 years old. I left her with my best friend, Lisa. I knew I couldn't take care of her while I was on the run, and I was afraid Robert would use her to find me." Gabriel felt his heart clench at the pain in Francesca's voice. "Oh, Francesca," he said softly. "That must have been so hard for you." Francesca wiped her tears. "It was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, but I knew it was the only way to keep her safe. Lisa promised to take care of her and never tell anyone about me." "And you haven't had contact with her since?" Gabriel asked gently. Francesca shook her head. "Not directly. Lisa sends me updates and photos occasionally, using a secret email we set up. But Sophia, she doesn't know I'm her mother. She thinks Lisa is her aunt and that her parents died in an accident." Gabriel was silent for a moment, processing everything he had heard. Then he took Francesca's hands in his. "Francesca, you did what you thought was best to protect your daughter. Don't blame yourself for that." Francesca looked at him with eyes full of gratitude and fear. "And now? Now that I'm rebuilding my life, do I have the right to come back into hers? What if she hates me for abandoning her?" Gabriel squeezed her hands gently. "Sophia deserves to know the truth, Francesca, and you deserve the chance to be her mother again. It won't be easy, but I'll be by your side every step of the way." Francesca hugged him suddenly, sobbing into his shoulder. Gabriel held her tightly, offering the silent comfort of his presence. When she finally calmed down, Gabriel gently suggested, "Why don't we start by reaching out to Lisa? We can plan a meeting and carefully explain the situation to Sophia." Francesca nodded slowly. "Yes," she said, her voice gaining strength. "Yes, I think it's time. Sophia deserves to know the truth." In the days that followed, Gabriel helped Francesca carefully plan how to approach Sophia. They reached out to Lisa, who was overjoyed to hear that Francesca was safe and ready to reconnect with her daughter. Lisa agreed to gradually prepare Sophia, first telling her that she had discovered information about her biological parents. They decided that an in-person meeting would be the best way to reveal the whole truth. The day of the meeting arrived, and Francesca was a bundle of nerves. Gabriel accompanied her to the park, where they had arranged to meet Lisa and Sophia, offering silent support. When they saw Lisa approaching with a dark-haired teenager, Francesca froze. Gabriel squeezed her hand gently. "You've got this," he murmured encouragingly. Sophia looked at Francesca curiously as they approached. There was something in her eyes, a spark of recognition that she didn't seem to fully understand. "Sophia," Lisa said softly, "this is Francesca. She's your mother." The shock on Sophia's face was palpable. She looked from Lisa to Francesca, her expression a mix of confusion, hurt, and a touch of hope. "My mother," she whispered. Francesca stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, Sophia, it's me. I know you must be confused and angry, but please give me a chance to explain." What followed was an emotional and difficult conversation. Francesca told her story, explaining why she had to leave Sophia and why she kept it a secret for so long. Sophia listened in silence, occasionally asking questions. Her emotions clearly conflicted. Gabriel watched from a distance, his heart aching for the pain he saw in both their eyes. But there was hope there too, a chance for healing and reconciliation. When the conversation finally ended, Sophia looked at Francesca with a mix of hurt and understanding. I need time to process all this," she said softly. Francesca nodded, wiping her tears. "I understand, sweetie. Take all the time you need. Hale will be here when you're ready." Sophia hesitated for a moment. Then, to everyone's surprise, she stepped forward and hugged Francesca briefly. It was a quick, uncertain hug, but one filled with promise. When Sophia and Lisa left, Francesca collapsed into Gabriel's arms, emotionally exhausted but with a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "It's going to be okay," Gabriel murmured, stroking her hair. "Give it time." In the weeks that followed, Francesca and Sophia began to reconnect slowly. Text messages turned into phone calls and eventually into regular meetings. It was a delicate process, filled with difficult moments, but also with laughter and mutual discovery. Gabriel watched with joy as Francesca blossomed in this new role as a mother. She painted with renewed passion, creating a series of works that captured the journey of reconnecting with her daughter. One day, as Gabriel admired a new painting of Francesca's, a moving portrait of Sophia, he found himself reflecting on his own life. At 75, he had found a new purpose in helping Francesca and Sophia, filling a void he hadn't even known existed. It was at this moment that Francesca entered the studio, a radiant smile on her face. "Gabriel," she said excitedly, "Sophia wants to meet you. She says she wants to get to know the man who saved her mother's life." Gabriel felt his heart warm at these words. "It would be an honor to meet her," he replied with a smile. Francesca approached, taking Gabriel's hands in hers. "Gabriel," she said softly, "there's something I need to tell you, something I discovered recently, and that, well, it will change everything." Gabriel frowned, concerned. "What is it, Francesca?" She took a deep breath, her eyes fixed on his. "Remember when I told you about my late husband Frank, Sophia's father?" Gabriel nodded, unsure where this was going. "Well," Francesca continued, her voice shaking slightly, "I found out something about him, something he told me just before he died, but I had blocked from my memory until recently." She paused as if gathering courage. "Frank? He had a son before he met me, a son he was forced to give up for adoption when he was very young." Gabriel felt his heart race, a strange feeling forming in his stomach. "Francesca, what are you saying?" Tears began to stream down Francesca's face. "Gabriel, the name of the baby Frank gave up for adoption, was Gabriel, and he was born exactly 75 years ago." The world seemed to spin around Gabriel. He gripped the edge of the table to steady himself, his mind struggling to process what he had just heard. I am," he stammered. Francesca nodded, tears now flowing freely. "Yes, Gabriel. You're Frank's son. You're my stepson." Gabriel felt his legs weaken, and he sat down heavily in a nearby chair. All his life he had wondered about his origins, about the parents he never knew, and now, at 75, he was discovering that his family had been right there, all along. How did you find this out?" he finally managed to ask. Francesca knelt beside him, holding his hands. "When I started reconnecting with Sophia, I began sifting through old memories, old documents. I found a diary of Frank's that I didn't have the courage to read after he died. In it, he talked about the son he had to give up for adoption, the dates, the name. It all matched." Gabriel shook his head, still stunned. "But why didn't you tell me before?" "I wanted to be sure," Francesca replied softly. "I did some tests and checked records. Gabriel, there's no doubt you're Frank's son." Tears began to form in Gabriel's eyes. All his life, he had felt incomplete, like a part of him was missing, and now suddenly everything made sense. "So, Sophia," he began, "is your granddaughter," Francesca completed, smiling through her tears. "And well, technically I'm your stepmother, but I think our relationship is a bit more complicated than that." Gabriel laughed weakly, the absurdity of the situation finally hitting him. Here he was, at 75, discovering that the woman he had rescued from the streets was actually part of his long-lost family. "Gabriel," Francesca said softly, "I know this is a lot to process, but I want you to know that this doesn't change anything about how I feel about you. You saved me, gave me a second chance at life. You're my family no matter how we got here." Gabriel looked at her, seeing the sincerity in her eyes. Slowly a smile began to form on his face. "Family," he repeated softly, savoring the word. "After all these years?" Francesca hugged him tight, and Gabriel returned the embrace, feeling as if a weight he had carried his entire life was finally being lifted. When they finally separated, Gabriel wiped his tears and said with a trembling smile, "Well, I guess we have a lot to talk about with Sophia now." Francesca laughed, nodding. "Yes, we do. She's going to be as surprised as you." In the days that followed, Gabriel went through an emotional roller coaster. He alternated between moments of intense joy at having finally found his family and periods of melancholy, mourning the lost years. Francesca was by his side every step of the way, sharing stories about Frank and helping Gabriel fill in the gaps of his past. She brought out old photos, letters, and Frank's diary, which Gabriel read avidly, finally getting to know the father he never had the chance to meet. The meeting with Sophia was emotional. The teenager was initially shocked to discover that the man who had helped her mother was actually her grandfather. But as the initial surprise passed, Sophia began asking questions, eager to learn more about her family history. "So you're really my grandpa?" Sophia asked, her eyes wide with wonder. Gabriel smiled gently. "Yes, darling, and I'm so happy to finally meet you." Sophia hesitated for a moment, then threw herself into Gabriel's arms, hugging him tight. "I always wanted a grandpa," she murmured against his chest. Gabriel felt his heart fill with love as he hugged his newly discovered granddaughter. Looking over Sophia's head, he saw Francesca watching the scene with tears in her eyes and a radiant smile. In the weeks that followed, the Mendez mansion took on a new life. Sophia began spending weekends there, filling the once silent corridors with laughter and youthful energy. Gabriel found a new joy in being a grandfather, eager to make up for lost time. Francesca continued to paint, now creating works that celebrated her newly reunited family. Her studio filled with portraits of Gabriel and Sophia, capturing precious moments of their new life together. One day, as the three of them were sitting on the veranda, enjoying a sunny afternoon, Gabriel found himself reflecting on the incredible journey that had brought them here. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "if someone had told me a year ago that I would find my family at 75, I would have laughed. But now, I can't imagine my life any other way." Francesca smiled, taking his hand. "Life has a funny way of surprising us, doesn't it?" Sophia, who was lying on the nearby grass, sat up, looking at the two of them curiously. "Do you think it was fate that you were meant to find each other?" Gabriel and Francesca exchanged a look. Then Gabriel replied, "I don't know if it was fate, darling, but I know I'm incredibly grateful to have found you both." In that moment, as the sun set on the horizon, bathing the garden in golden hues, Gabriel felt a peace he had never experienced before. He had spent most of his life feeling incomplete, searching for something he couldn't name. Now, surrounded by his unlikely but beloved family, he finally felt whole. Their story, one of loss, redemption, and discovery, was unique, but the love they shared was universal. And as Gabriel watched Francesca and Sophia laughing together, he knew that no matter what the future held, they would face it together as a family. The sound of a doorbell echoed through the mansion, interrupting the peaceful moment. Gabriel frowned, not expecting any visitors. "I'll get it," Sophia offered, jumping up and running inside. Gabriel and Francesca exchanged a curious look, but remained seated, enjoying the warmth of the setting sun. A few minutes later, they heard rapid footsteps approaching. "Grandpa! Grandma!" Sophia called, her voice a mix of excitement and nervousness. "There's a man here wanting to talk to you. He says it's important." Gabriel stood up, a sense of apprehension settling in his stomach. Beside him, he felt Francesca tense. A tall, well-dressed man followed Sophia onto the veranda. His eyes swept over the place before settling on Francesca. A cold smile formed on his lips. "Hello, Francesca," he said softly. "It's been a long time." Francesca paled, her hands gripping Gabriel's arm. "Robert," she whispered, the fear evident in her voice. Gabriel immediately understood who the man was. Francesca's abusive ex-husband, the man she had fled from years ago. "What do you want?" Gabriel asked firmly, placing himself protectively in front of Francesca. Robert raised an eyebrow, his calculating gaze assessing Gabriel. "Well, well," he said with an amused tone. "It seems you found a new protector, Francesca, but I'm afraid that won't help much." He took a step forward, his posture threatening. "I've come to retrieve what's mine. The paintings, Francesca. The ones you stole from me when you ran away." Francesca stepped out from behind Gabriel, her eyes flashing with anger despite her fear. "I didn't steal anything from you, Robert. Those paintings were mine, and I don't have any of them anymore." Robert laughed humorlessly. "Oh, but you have something much more valuable now, don't you? I saw the ads for your exhibition. Your new works are causing quite a stir in the art world." He took another step forward, his tone becoming menacing. "And I want my cut. After all, it was I who made you the artist you are today." Gabriel felt his anger growing. "Get off my property," he said in a low, dangerous voice. "Now." Robert ignored him, his eyes fixed on Francesca. "You have 1 week to bring me half the profit from your exhibition. Otherwise—" His eyes shifted to Sophia, who was watching the scene with wide, frightened eyes. "Well, it would be a shame if something happened to your lovely family, wouldn't it?" Before anyone could react, Anthony came running through the garden, followed by 2 police officers. "Robert Silver," one of the officers said firmly, "you're under arrest for tax fraud and art forgery." Robert's face contorted into a mask of rage as the officers handcuffed him. He shot one last venomous look at Francesca. "This isn't over," he snarled before being led away. When the police left with Robert, a stunned silence fell over the group. It was Sophia who broke it, running to hug Francesca. "Mom, are you okay?" she asked, her voice trembling. Francesca hugged her daughter tightly, tears streaming down her face. "I'm okay, sweetie. We're all okay now." Gabriel turned to Anthony, who looked exhausted but relieved. "How did you know?" he asked. Anthony smiled wearily. "After our meeting at the cafe, I started investigating Robert on my own. I discovered evidence of his illegal activities and handed it over to the police. When I heard he was coming here, I ran as fast as I could." Gabriel placed a hand on Anthony's shoulder, squeezing it gratefully. "Thank you," he said simply. That night, after Sophia had gone to bed and Anthony had left with a promise to return the next day to help with any legal matters, Gabriel and Francesca sat on the veranda, each with a glass of wine. "Is it really over?" Francesca asked softly, her voice still trembling with emotion. Gabriel took her hand, squeezing it gently. "Yes, my dear. Robert can't hurt you or Sophia anymore. You're safe now." Francesca let out a long sigh, as if releasing a weight she had carried for years. "I never thought, after so long running and hiding, that I would finally be free." Gabriel smiled, pulling her close. "You're stronger than you think, Francesca. You survived. You rebuilt. You created a new life for yourself and Sophia." Francesca rested her head on Gabriel's shoulder, silent tears streaming down her face. "I couldn't have done it without you, Gabriel. You gave us a home, a family." Gabriel kissed the top of her head affectionately. "And you gave me the same. Who would have thought that at 75 I would finally find the meaning of my life?" They fell silent for a long moment, watching the stars dotting the night sky. Finally, Francesca spoke again, her voice soft but determined. "I think it's time we paint a new picture, Gabriel. One that tells our story, all of it. The ups and downs, the losses and the gains, the fear and the courage. A picture that shows that no matter how dark the night may seem, there's always hope for a new dawn." Gabriel smiled, feeling his heart swell with love and gratitude. "That sounds perfect, my dear, and I can't wait to see what you create." As the couple watched the night sky, they both felt a sense of peace and wholeness they had never experienced before. They had faced their fears, confronted their pasts, and in the process, found not only each other, but themselves. The journey hadn't been easy, but every step had led them to this moment. A moment of love, family, and above all, hope for the future. And as the stars twinkled above them, Gabriel and Francesca knew that together they could face anything life threw their way. The future was a blank canvas, ready to be filled with the vibrant colors of their new life together, and they couldn't wait to start painting,